Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, a conversation through the careers of writer Simon Furman and artist Andrew Wildman. Recollections and revelations about the highs and the lows as creatives in comics, books, games, film and TV. Welcome to The Rest is Giant Robots, episode 35. I'm Andrew Wildman.
And I'm Simon Furman. And actually, no, you can't see because unless you're our Prime viewers, you can't see that Andrew is currently in a hotel room in Shepperton. And we're doing this sort of, of an evening in between takes, really, of you working on Luther.
Yeah, I'm at Shepperton Studios, so I'm there pretty much 5 days a week at the moment. Storyboarding for the second Luther movie, so it's all been announced now. I've been working on it for quite a long time, really. To some degree, ever since the first Luther movie finished, because I know Jamie, the director, really well. Um, I'd worked with him on Doctor Who and a lot of other projects. And then he was the director on Luther season 5. So I storyboarded for him on that. And pretty much as soon as season 5 had finished, there was the idea that that was going to be it in terms of a TV series, and that and Idris Elba wanted to do it as movies. And so, he'd been talking about it for a long time. Jamie was up for doing it. So not long after season 5 finished, Jamie got in touch with me and said, "There's a possibility it could happen," and he said, myself, Idris, and Neil Cross, the writer, the three of them were kind of trying to kind of nudge all the right people to get it picked up. Netflix were the ones that were interested, so he was pitching stuff to Netflix. So I was helping him with kind of mood board documents, all that kind of stuff. He was putting together what they call a deck. So it's just like loads of images, concept, all that kind of stuff. Neil was writing the script. So that was a long time ago. Anyway, eventually made the first one. And then since then, we've been talking about it. And I first did some boarding for Jamie. They got some seed money from Netflix before they were actually going to green light it. So were obviously going to do it, but they were just waiting for everything to all line up before they actually press the green light. So there was some money for Neil to write the script, and then I was doing certain bits of boarding that he wanted doing, so that the script and the vision for it could be pitched to the producers at Netflix. Because then from that they have to kind of decide how much budget and all that kind of thing. And the budget on this one is considerably lower than the first one, but that's largely because the first one had so many problems, because of COVID and all sorts of other reasons, that it went massively over budget.
Right.
So they're getting clever with how they spend the money, and it's going to make it a better movie for sure.
Yeah, sometimes, the big budget is as much a problem as a small budget because you have to box clever with a small budget.
Yeah. And Jamie's used to doing that. Because he's done a lot of TV. TV budgets can be big now. So, the shows that he's done for Apple and Paramount and all those kind of things have been big budgets. If anyone's seen, I don't know if you've ever seen Invasion on Apple.
I've not seen it.
Huge sci-fi show. That was done before the Luther movie, but that was done during COVID. I think they'd started it. And then COVID hit, so that was a really difficult sci-fi TV show to do, but that was a huge budget. The series of Invasion season 1 was a bigger budget for the whole season, a bigger budget than this Luther movie is now.
Yeah,
but Netflix have kind of changed their model. They were spending a lot of money on their early movies, and now they've kind of changed that model.
yeah.
So they're inviting people to just get really clever with the funds that they
Yeah,
have at their disposal.
indeed. So we're going to talk a little bit today about our creator-owned work.
Yeah,
It may well spill over into another podcast because
yeah,
there's a lot to talk about. But,
I think it
we
will.
felt that even though we've talked about our various creator-owned projects, we've never sort of done a deep dive into all the pitfalls and considerations and problems you face as as someone going into self-publishing.
Mm,
It can be, as we both know, a lot of work for kind of little reward. And before our main audience joined us, we were talking about just how this is something you only into, I think, if you have that sort of passion for it, that need, that
mm.
itch you need to scratch, because it can be a hell of a lot of work for not much return. But sometimes you just got to do your own thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, for sure, I did because not being a writer, I'd never really written anything, so well, I didn't want to write it actually. I tried to get somebody else to write it, but they wouldn't do it.
Mm.
Um, but no, it was completely right that I did write it myself,
Mm.
and yeah, so for me that very much was a story I wanted to tell, and yeah, there was no way I wasn't going to do it one way or
Mm.
another. Um, a real
Yeah.
passion project.
We were saying again before our sort of general audience joined us, was that, you know, it's weird to think it took us quite so far into our careers before either of us decided we wanted to do our own self-publishing
Hmm.
thing.
We must have considered the engine as a
Yes.
print thing, mustn't we?
Did we though? I mean, I think we developed the engine, and this will come into what I'm going to talk about unto the death. I think we envisioned the engine originally as a web comic,
Yeah.
which is notoriously difficult to make a revenue stream from
Hmm.
of any note. And then I think then we just started pitching it as a TV show. Did we ever pitch it as a comic book? I can't remember.
I seem to remember that there there was you wrote a kind of a breakdown of essentially what a print version would be, but we were by that point, I think we were already moving on to other, paid work, and we just didn't have time for it.
Yeah.
So
I
it
mean,
kind of
the engine came out of a period where we were living very close to each other, and I think we were just talking and pot boiling
mm,
ideas all the time, and we really wanted, and Adam Jennings, of course, helped us out considerably getting the engine sort of realized as a digital motion comic.
mm,
But
yeah,
yeah, so I suppose, no, you're right. I mean, Wildfur was our own IPs and our own, but it wasn't kind of publishing, was it?
no, no, no,
So yeah, for me, it was definitely to the death. I was looking back at the timeline of To the Death, and it all started probably around 2015 was when Jeff Jeff was spending a lot of time in China. Jeff had been working in advertising for years by this point, but he was sort of champing at the bit to do some comics work. I think advertising work is kind of limited, and you're drawing, I don't know, a Coke bottle more or less, in some kind of scenario. And
yeah,
I think Jeff was just creatively stifled and desperate to do something new.
mm,
So he came to me and he said, "Look, I'm going to have a lot of time." He was spending time in China with his wife. They were going out to see relatives, and it left him with a lot of free time and an early version of a drawing tablet.
right,
So he just basically said to me, "Look, I'd like to do some comics work. Don't quite know how we're going to deliver it. Um, but I'd really like to be working in comics again. So I was happy with that. And we'd always had this slight urge because we couldn't do Dragon's Claws because it was a
Mm.
Marvel project and no one, I mean, unless Marvel wanted to do something with it, we couldn't. So we thought, let's do a kind of Dragon's Claws inspired series,
Mm.
similar sort of vibe and but completely different characters, different scenarios. And I just thought, well, how do I work on this? We had some idea it might be a web comic.
Hmm.
Print even then seemed daunting to try and get out in print form. So we started talking about, okay, you're working on a screen. Let's just do the whole thing as almost like a shooting board. So
Yeah.
it's going to be screen shaped panels, and you're just going to swipe to the next one, swipe to the next one. And that was kind of where we left. We just thought he's working on a computer. Let's keep it simple and do it as a potential web comic. Again, the realities of how we monetize a web comic and what we could expect were kind of out there, but we both just wanted to do it. So I wrote To the Death as like a film screenplay,
Mm.
really, really loose panel descriptions, but not panel descriptions, just like a screenplay.
Mm.
Direction, dialogue, scene change, direction, dialogue. And just thought, well, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't need to be a length. It will just be what it turns out to be, what Jeff wants to draw. How
Mm.
many panels? Almost like a manga. He could break it down into tiny little movements if he wanted to, working on a Cintiq.
Mm.
So, that was the genesis of it all. And we knew it was a long-term thing because it was big. It just we couldn't quite keep it small, but Jeff just did. He went manga with it somewhat and drew, 6 panels where probably in a comic book you'd draw one,
Yeah.
just because you can make tiny digital tweaks to a scene and do another panel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was where we started really. And like I say, it probably took a year before we felt confident that we could put something out there. So 2016, September, I think, we launched at one convention or another. It might have been ICE, the
Hmm.
Shane Chebsey convention that the if you're on video, you can see behind me the little promotional poster we did with
Mm.
the Jeff logo for it before Richard Starkings got involved and just went ha about our logo and did us a proper one. But but this was the genesis of it all, and I want to throw it over to you in a minute and just because that's how we kicked off. But where we went from there was, you know, we didn't really know what we were doing, I would say, is the truth.
Yeah. No, I mean, mine was very, very different. So what eventually became Horizon, in many ways, conceptually started, I don't know. It was kind of the end result of an idea that I'd had in the mid 80s.
Wow. Okay.
Probably even before, probably even slightly earlier than that, actually. Late 70s, early 80s. I had an idea for a narrative and it just rattled around in my head, in my head, in my head. I did some little drawings and all sorts of stuff like that. Um, and I gradually consolidated it into essentially a beginning, middle, and end. So I knew what the story was, but I didn't do anything with it. at all, apart from just some doodles. And then, as you know, I think many people know, I had all sorts of personal and professional difficulties, resulting in a sort of a breakdown in many senses in, I guess that was 90, Christ, 97,
Hmm.
98.
Hmm.
And then during my counselling, the counsellor I was talking to, I told her the story, this story, and because she saw all like the internal metaphor of that as to exactly what it was I was trying to say, she
Hmm.
kind of very gently deconstructed it for me and essentially held a mirror up to it and said, this is what you're actually saying. I know what you said to me, but this is what you're trying to say.
Hmm.
And I found that absolutely fascinating. So then I kind of developed it a bit more since then. Um, then it kind of evolved into something else, probably in around about 2008. And then I spoke to a writer colleague, Jason Cobley, who was well known in small press. And he took the basic idea and completely rewrote it. And it was changing and changing and changing, but the essence of the idea, the story became completely different, but the essence of the idea was always the same.
Yeah.
Um, which was largely the whole dream thing for anybody who's read Horizon. It's the idea of having breakthroughs kind of in your dreams. Um, and so that evolved, and eventually he didn't do it. I spoke to you about the project, and then a fellow industry professional said, "You need to write it. It's so
Hmm.
much your thing. You can't
Yeah.
expect anyone else to write it, because they won't say what you want to say in the way that you want
Hmm.
to say it." So in the end, I did. So then I started actually writing notes, bullet point notes, one weekend when I was in Holland at a Marillion convention. So they do every
Hmm.
2 years, they do these massive conventions. So concerts in the evenings and then just like chill out in the day. And I started writing it then. And it very quickly began to sort of formulate itself. And it was going to be a two-part thing. I wrote the first part and raised some money on Indiegogo, which is kind of like Kickstarter, but
Hmm.
I kind of put it out there on Indiegogo, and I got a little bit of money to cover some print costs, and I released the first chapter at Thought Bubble, and probably in about 2010, 2011, something like that. Then I was working on the second chapter, and then once I was working on the second chapter, it's like, this doesn't end right. Kind of knew what the end was, but it wasn't right. So,
Hmm.
but this is the joy of, and what I found the absolute joy of doing a project of my own. It's like, well, I can go where I like. I am committed to like an editor
Hmm.
as to where this is going to
No.
end. A bit like you saying with To the Death, you can just run and run.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized what the end should be, um, just completely out of the blue. And it was a whole third chapter that I hadn't envisaged at all.
Mm.
That was absolutely key. The denouement is like, I can't believe I didn't have it there in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, so it took a long time from releasing the first chapter to doing this other two chapters and then collecting it together as a book, which I think I did the whole collected thing in 2016. And then even from then, I was looking at ways of tweaking it and then adding some color. Um, and this is the thing about self-publishing, that what I learnt about what was possible to do and how to afford it and which printers to use and how to self-publish it, because color is very, very expensive, but I found certain ways of kind of getting around that. Um, and now it's a lot easier to actually get it in print and
Yeah.
more affordable.
Yeah.
Um, we could have a
And
nuts
that,
and bolts kind of section or episode, couldn't we? And
yeah. I mean, I think it'd probably be good at some point to put some of the early materials up. I've got an archive of To the Death stuff. And, as you were saying, To the Death evolved. And, because obviously I was working with Jeff, I was getting kind of feedback. And, it's like, oh, I'm really enjoying this, Simon, but I think something's missing. And, I certainly wasn't offended by that because I thought, okay, good, tell me more. And Jeff couldn't quite put it into words, but he just said there isn't, you know, I mean, basically the gist To the Death is it's sort of one man against this impossibly corrupt corporate system. And he
Yeah.
just said, this is all great, but who's he fighting until he gets to the end? Who's our sort of other bad guy in this? And he was right completely. There wasn't a sort of more hands-on uh, antagonist in the series.
Right.
So so because To the Death was kind of our love letter to Dragon's Claws, I thought, well, what we need is a Death's Head. So we created a bounty hunter called Killer Toa, who's this sort of slightly aquatic looking, sort of killing machine who sort of regenerates his limbs like some amphibians do and things.
Mm.
And and once that piece fell into place, it was like the whole thing solidified
Mm.
and suddenly became something that we just thought, yeah, this is it. This is what we want to be writing, drawing, and this is what we think people will want to read because it's got this very colorful, you know, not Death's Head in mannerisms, but there was a certain amount of nod all the time to, again, something from our catalogue, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, and that was just Jeff sort of vocalizing that something wasn't there, some element. And he was completely right. And that's why I love the kind of creator-owned collaborative process is that
Mm.
you have someone else's eyes on it, because
Mm.
normally you have an editor
Mm.
looking at your stuff and saying, it's okay, but it could be better.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was Jeff just jumping in with that, you know, it needs something more. And I think he was just looking artistically as well. It's like, what can I draw that's going to be more interesting than just kind of soldier types in battle? And once we put the sort of the fish style sort of bounty hunter in there, he quickly, like Death's Head, kind of almost became the semi-star of the show.
Right. Yeah. That's good.
But
That's good. Yeah, and
yeah,
it gives you another character to kind of travel with, doesn't it?
yeah, it really does. And like I say, he just made the whole thing more rounded. And of course, once he got dropped into the mix, everything from then on sort of got revised and amped up
Mm.
because he was in it.
Mm.
So yeah, excuse me. Authentic sneeze there. Um,
Do you want me to edit that out or?
no, no. I don't think I'm contagious across a podcast, so anyway, yes, so that was my little thing with To the Death. So, but you kind of didn't have that apart from, sort of your the the counselor and other people. So how did you deal with being your own editor on it?
Very good question. I really don't know. And to a degree, it was just purely driven by instinct. I mean, because I'm not a writer. Well, I am now. I can
Mm,
say that, I guess, but because I wasn't a writer, but I knew what kind of narratives I enjoyed, and I just kind of I took the characters for a walk. I mean, I started off with one character, which was Alice Ann, which
mm,
wasn't originally her name anyway.
yep,
Um, and then there was going to be the mother. I knew that. And then in the dreamscape, there was going to be a companion, which was going to be like a toy or something that kind of came to life. So they're three very basic characters that perform very basic roles. Um, I knew kind of where I wanted to get, and I knew along the way a couple of the things that I wanted to say, and I just ran with it. And
Mm.
then something which I was kind of aware of, but had never actually read or looked at was the whole kind of hero journey structure or the three act structure, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and I went on a seminar, like a personal development seminar, and the coach who was running the seminar used the hero's journey as the framework for the seminar that he was, like a
Hmm.
coaching thing, which is exactly the point of it, really, because it's like a life journey. The hero's journey is a kind of a metaphor for our own internal stuff, and also just the way that our years play out very often in front of us. So a lot of it was instinctive, but then I looked at that and I thought, and I did a bit of research about it. The whole Joseph Campbell um, hero with 1,000 faces, or whatever it's called, and then the Christopher Vogler from Disney, who kind of adapted that as the writer's journey. So I bought a copy of that and I read it, and it was literally like a ticking exercise. Not that I was writing it and ticking all those boxes, but I'd already written it, and I was reading it, thinking, I've done that, 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 and it's almost because it's just a natural way of telling a story.
Yeah. I mean, there are kind of rules, I mean, in the sort of film screen work I've been doing, I mean, I've read a few how to write a screenplay books, and, they all have different takes on it. But you start to distill, there's a certain kind of structure, three acts. uh, there's a kind of inciting incident. There's a something, and there are these things that happen in almost any movie. Sure, there's exceptions, but
Mm,
largely these things happen for a reason.
mm,
And there's the world that was in the first act that turns into the upside down world in the second act because everything changes for your hero, protagonist, whatever.
mm,
And I found those books really interesting, not slavishly, but just to, as you say, look at the end thing you've written and go, how close are we now to that? Oh, look,
mm.
here, this happens. That's right. They should be having a debate at this point, whether it's an internal debate or whatever, and there are these things that, you know, you can sort of put them on any film. I recently rewatched Back to the Future,
Right.
the very original first one of those,
Mm,
just because I wanted to revisit it for another reason. But anyway, I watched it again, and the film book I most like is called Save the Cat. It's
mm.
really good. It kind of, in a very humorous way, breaks down the sort of the way a film is put together and
Yeah.
the story wise. And there's one bit where he basically just says the theme is stated. Either your lead character or someone else in conversation states the theme of the movie.
Mm,
And in Back to the Future, more or less exactly in structure terms, where this happens is a scene with Marty McFly and the headmaster. It's very early on in the film. He's late for school. He meets his girlfriend outside. They go in, hoping to avoid the headmaster, but he's there waiting for him. And
mm.
the headmaster says to him, you're going to amount for nothing. Your father amounted to nothing. All McFlys amount to nothing. It's history or something, or it's however he phrases it. And
Mm.
Michael J. Fox says back to him, "Yeah, well, history's going to change." And that's it. That's Back to the Future right there. Theme stated,
Yeah.
literally in the first sort of two scenes of the movie.
Yeah.
and and you can do this. You can look at films once you've sort of seen the mechanics of them and see whether they're hitting those points.
Yeah.
And so the screenplay we're working on at the moment, we're on maybe the third recent draft, and that there's been a lot more. But
Mm.
I just decided for, it was all submitted, but I thought I'm going to save the cat this script. I'm literally going to pick up Save the Cat and see how close we are to his. Scott Snyder is the author, to his sort of, this is where roughly you should be hitting in your screenplay progression.
Yeah.
And you know what? We again, a bit like you with Horizon, I just thought, wow,
We did
there
it.
we are. We're hitting those moments.
Yeah.
So,
I guess we've kind of absorbed so many narratives over the years, and the that structure just goes back forever. I mean, fairy tales are the classic,
mm,
and folk tales are
yeah,
the classic example, and we've absorbed that. So yeah, that is a story,
yeah.
That's how you lay out a story. That's how you tell a story, and it's just part of being human, I think.
It is, yeah, it's a journey, and
Mm.
you have to take your audience on that journey in a way that they sort of find there's a relevance to their own lives and experiences, even if it's a mad fantasy, there's
Mm.
something in there they can kind of latch onto.
Mm.
And when we'll do another film one soon, another movie one, and w- that's the funny thing. When I go to the movies, I can see the ones that are hitting it and the ones that aren't.
Yeah, I mean, there are classic examples of the ones that do it. I mean, Lord of the Rings as a narrative was one of the big ones that very much followed that kind of that pattern. But I mean, many kind of modern day movies do, Star Wars,
Hmm,
whatever. They're just Harry Potter. They all follow this exactly the same
hmm.
template. But so do a lot of the most of the modern Disney movies do, like The Lion King, Little Mermaid, whatever, they all do. I'm sure Avatar does.
Yeah.
The Marvel movies do. The first Thor movie is just almost like a tick boxing exercise.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
really
definitely.
is.
I
But it
mean,
works.
yeah, I mean, it does. It
The
works for a
Matrix
reason.
is another perfect example.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And yet, it doesn't look like a formulaic movie at all, but
No,
it's hitting those notes at the
yeah.
right places.
Star Wars is another classic one.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there was a bit of a, not a cult as such, but there was a thing in LA round about the time that Star Wars was done. What was it called? It was almost like a pseudo religion called pantheism, I think, and a lot
Hmm.
of Hollywood people kind of prescribed to that. And Star Wars was very much a lot of Hollywood movies that came out around about that time very much follow that template.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of Greek myths, legends, and all
Yeah,
those sort of stories, and what have we got next year? We've got the Odyssey, haven't we, coming
yeah,
out? It's like there we are back at, effectively the storytelling template.
yeah, yeah.
A journey. It's always a journey.
It's always a journey. Yeah, yeah. Interstellar as well. I mean, even big, cerebral movies follow the same kind of template just
Yeah,
because it works.
yeah, completely.
So I did that completely by accident with
Yeah.
with the
And
writer.
I'm not sure To the Death is exactly that, but it's got elements of it. The funny thing with To the Death is it ended up quite so sprawling and bigger than we should have. This was mistake number one, I think, that we didn't put some kind of parameter on how big this thing could be, because
Mm,
I think it just became a bit leggy in places because it's better in print because we cut a lot of stuff down. But on the digital release, which I'm going to talk about now,
mm,
it was just big.
mm,
We did because we couldn't figure out how to release it really. So we just did it as digital episodes,
mm,
something like 18 digital episodes, and they were big.
mm,
And it was fine, but I just all the time I thought we could make this leaner and meaner
mm.
as it was coming out. And it's a very difficult thing to monetize, to put digital episodes up there. We got some subscribers, but not many.
Mm.
And, I think people just wanted print for all that everyone was leaning towards digital at the time.
Yeah.
Everyone kept saying, when's it coming into print?
I guess because you are comics creators and because it looks like a comic, because it's drawn by a comic book artist,
Mm,
the sort of fan base, seedling sort of fan base that you would have to launch it through. Yeah, I mean, the comic book people. I mean, the
yeah.
way to do it digitally, I guess, is to do something. This was the thing with the engine. It's like we've said this before, so I won't say too much about it. But back in the day when we were doing the engine, um, there were online comics, but they just weren't very good because they were on screen. You kind of expected, I think the viewer would expect more of them because screen people are like gamers and all that kind of
Mm,
thing. So when a comic cropped up on screen in the late 90s, early 2000s, with little bits of animation, it was just rubbish animation. It wasn't.
mm,
So comics kind of belong in print, but they can go onto screen if you do something. I mean, now there are sort of platforms that very much
mm,
are comics on screen, and it's kind of cross-pollinated a bit. It's kind of found its footing, but you have to. I think you kind of have to offer something more, and many people have tried many different things
yeah.
to offer more than just a comic on a screen. Or you just do it as a comic on a screen. But even like you say, with the swiping, whatever they were, 16 by 9 sort of format
Mm,
images, it's like, well, it feels like it wants to be more.
yeah.
It feels like it wants to move. It feels like it wants to have sound or something.
Yeah. And I think, Jeff and I also felt because we're comics people, really, we're print and paper, it was somewhat unsatisfying for us
Mm,
releasing it as webisodes. It just sort of felt okay, but where's the physical copy? Where's the thing you can hold and put on
yeah,
your shelf?
yeah. Yeah, and I think with on some online comics, the ones that do get some traction, then the print version comes later. And there are some big successes. There was one on long time ago when I first started looking at Patreon and put some stuff on Patreon, and I followed few people, and there was a woman who did an online comic called Lackadaisy. It was with cats and stuff,
Okay.
beautifully illustrated,
Mm,
and they were like cats, but they were kind of like gangsters. It was got a very
mm,
sort of noir, 30s noir look to it.
yeah.
Um, and did incredibly well. I mean, she, very definitely made a living out of doing that. And
Yeah.
then more recently on Webtoon, um, I mean, Webtoon's it's a kind of Korean thing, so it's awash with manga, romance, and fantasy
Yes.
and all that kind of thing. But there is some other content on there, and the thing that caught my eye, and probably the one, I mean, I haven't looked at much else because it doesn't really appeal to me, but there's something called Stagtown,
Okay.
um, and it's just incredible. It's like a sci-fi horror thing, and I was
Mm,
absolutely hooked.
mm,
And that was so successful that it's been optioned as a I don't know if it's a movie or a TV series, but purely because it got
yeah.
so much traction on there. So
Yeah. No, I mean, it can happen. It can work. I just think, especially with To the Death, we were somewhere betwixt and between,
yeah,
web comics and a slight feeling of we don't want web comics anymore, and then these other delivery platforms and
yeah,
things. And it was just big and sprawling. It should have been more condensed. I think we just got a bit carried away with it.
yeah, yeah. So then 5 points, you very definitely did opt for print.
Yes, yeah, we did. I mean, I think we may have to talk a bit about, because I've still got a ton of stuff to talk about to the death. But you know, we basically we got it into digital, but always. I mean, there was a Kickstarter that didn't work. There was um, a kind of prequel thing that we stuck into a sort of small press annual. So there were lots of little intermediary stages before we got to print. So yeah, there's
Yeah,
probably more to talk about there. And yes, 5 Points was always going to be print.
yeah, yeah. No, it's good. It's good to really know what it's going to be and how you're
Yeah.
going to do it, because otherwise that sort of uncertainty and not lack of confidence as such, but that uncertainty shows up for the people that are looking at it, and I think they
Mm.
feel that, don't they?
Yeah, and I think that's the case with To the Death. I'm still very pleased with it, and certainly once we did get it into print, it just sort of felt like it always should have been in print.
Yeah.
But it's still, if I had the whole thing to do again, I would do it very differently.
Mm. Yeah.
But maybe we can talk a bit more about that next time, and we can talk about oxygen as well because we haven't touched on that.
Yeah. Well, maybe what we ought to do, because this is all a bit cobbled together, because like we say, you're kind of busy working, going off to meetings about a movie script, and I'm at Shepperton and not home very often. So that was a kind of a really nice introduction to all of that, I think. And it would be nice if we get, for our valuable listeners and viewers, we'll get some real structure to this. It would be quite nice to actually just put together some very clear sort of points about the mechanics of doing it, and then inside of that, talk about how we applied those mechanics to what we did, and what we learned, and what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think we'll do another episode, maybe even next episode, devoted to this, because I think the feedback we got from that announcement was that lots of people were really interested in self-publishing and
Yeah.
and the the good and the bad of it. So I think we'll do, we'll continue this discussion maybe next time,
Hmm.
and then we'll put together some of these slightly bullet point things of the ways that we went right, the ways we went wrong, and things like that.
Yeah. 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 Good.
Excellent. Well, look, great chatting, and glad we got this one sort of
Yeah. Get something out there for
yeah, yes,
for
quickly.
everybody.
And
So I should be able to get this. I won't do it this evening. I might be able to get it edited tomorrow evening, and so
okay.
that we'll stand a chance of getting it out for Saturday. And for
Shall
the
I stop
primes,
recording at this point?
well, we'll just let them know what's
Okay.
going on. So
Yeah,
primes, if
sure.
you're still listening, yeah,
Yes.
you might have it a day early.
Yeah.
I'm
We will.
determined to feed the
Yeah.
Prime members.
Yeah, we will get it out there. Sorry about the delay.
Yeah,
And, we'll endeavor to do the next one sooner rather than later so that we're back on track.
yeah, fabulous. All right, Simon, good as always. Thank you,
Yep.
everybody, for listening. Thank you for your patience, and we will be back.
Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you for listening to The Rest is Giant Robots. If you enjoyed what you heard, please consider subscribing for more, and maybe share with like-minded friends. This has been a Wildfur production.